Do you recall that specific, intoxicating rush? The sensation of walking into a casino with nothing but a crumpled $20 bill in your pocket and yet being treated like visiting aristocracy. I am referring to the endless horizons of chilled shrimp on ice, the prime rib carved on demand by chefs in tall white hats, and the towers of desserts that seemed to defy structural engineering.
For decades, that was the core of the Vegas brand promise. It was the hook. But recently, I revisited one of those legendary sites at a major strip resort to see what remained. The lights were dead, the carving stations were dismantled and hauled away, and mere feet from where that feast used to be, a family stood in a long queue at a fast casual kiosk, swiping a credit card for an $18 slice of lukewarm pizza and a $10 bottle of water. You are forced to ask yourself, why the catastrophic decline? How did we devolve from dining like kings on loose change to being extorted for a basic snack? This narrative isn't simply about inflation, supply chain issues, or rising food costs. It is something far more clinical and deliberate. It is a fundamental breach of contract. For over 50 years, Las Vegas operated on a tacit agreement with the public. You bring your bankroll to the tables, and we will subsidize your sustenance. They happily absorbed massive food losses just to pull you across the threshold and keep you there. But the megacorporations controlling the strip today decided that model was obsolete. They tore up the rulebook. They don't just want your gaming losses anymore. They want to extract maximum value from every single aspect of your visit, including your dinner plate. The naked truth is that the death of the buffet wasn't an unfortunate tragedy. It was a calculated liquidation of a service they no longer wanted to provide. Pay close attention, because I'm going to deconstruct the secret corporate playbook that eradicated the cheap meal forever. We will dissect the 7 specific stages of this operation, from the initial lure that baited us into the desert to the convenient kill shot of 2020 that they hoped you wouldn't analyze too closely. And ensure you watch until the end, when we audit the food hall, because I will expose the financial architecture behind them, proving they are nothing more than a sophisticated revenue extraction scheme designed to bleed you dry while simulating a luxury upgrade. Part 1. The initial lure, the economics of the trap. To solve this case, you must first understand the psychology of the target. We need to rewind history and acknowledge a harsh reality. The Las Vegas buffet was never truly about nutrition or culinary excellence. It was a snare, a delicious, subsidized snare, engineered by mobsters and early casino moguls who understood behavioral economics better than any university professor. Travel back to the 1940s, to the El Rancho Vegas. They launched the Midnight Chuckwagon Buffet to keep players in the building. The entry fee? $1. Even adjusted for inflation, that price is economically irrational. It doesn't even cover the raw ingredients. But the owners didn't view that dollar as income. They viewed it as fuel injection for the gambling engine. They recognized a brutal variable in their business model. A hungry gambler leaves the premises to find food, and once they exit into the fresh air, the trance breaks. They might go back to their hotel to sleep. They might defect to a rival casino down the street. Thus, the casinos forged the golden handcuffs. They retained you on site by practically giving the food away, making it illogical for you to leave. For decades, this was the core algorithm of the strip. Casino managers happily wrote off $2, $3, or $5 per head on food costs. Why? Because the data proved that the average diner, once fed and happy, would pivot and deposit $50 or $100 at the blackjack tables or slot machines within the hour. The buffet was never a restaurant in the traditional sense. It was a marketing expenditure, identical to the neon signage outside or the free drinks on the floor. It was a symbiotic loop built on a beautiful deception. You felt you were exploiting the system by overeating for pennies, but in reality, the system had you exactly where it required, sated, docile, and ready to wager your paycheck. Part 2. The Super Buffet Arms Race, the era of excess. Then, in the 1990s, the variable changed significantly. The trap evolved from a simple meal into a massive spectacle. This was the golden age, the era of the Super Buffet. It arguably commenced when the Rio unveiled the Carnival World Buffet in 1993. They didn't just provide calories, they provided theater. No longer just hot dogs and cold cuts. This was global cuisine executed by actual chefs in front of a live audience. This innovation catalyzed a hospitality arms race across the entire Strip. The Bellagio, the Wynn, Caesar's Palace, all engaged in a war of excess. Suddenly, the standard expectation was all-you-can-eat Alaskan king crab legs, prime rib, and high-end caviar. The logistical volume required to sustain this was staggering. At the apex of this era, a single super buffet would liquidate 8,000 pounds of shrimp and 2,000 pounds of prime rib in one single week. The financial deficit on these premium items was astronomical. We're discussing food costs hitting 60% or 70% of the ticket revenue, whereas a viable standalone restaurant typically targets 30% to survive. But in this era, the casinos disregarded the food cost ratio entirely. They were battling for market dominance and mindshare. If Bellagio had crab, Mirage required lobster to compete. They classified these multi-million-dollar losses as necessary prestige overhead. It was the zenith of Vegas hospitality. They treated a mechanic from Ohio with the same culinary reverence as an oil baron. It was the solitary location on Earth where a working-class family could access true culinary luxury for $20. We assumed this generosity was a permanent feature of the city. But we failed to notice that in the back offices, accountants were monitoring these metrics with increasing panic, sharpening their knives for the moment they could finally slaughter the golden goose. Part 3. The corporate takeover, efficiency over hospitality. Every economic bubble eventually bursts, and for Vegas, the end began when the visionaries and mobsters exited and the MBAs entered. This is the corporate takeover, the critical moment hospitality was euthanized by the doctrine of profit maximization. In the early 2000s, massive consolidation swept the Strip. Giant conglomerates like MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment acquired everything. These weren't gamblers running the floor by gut instinct. They were Wall Street operators, answerable to shareholders demanding quarterly yield and perpetual growth. When these corporate auditors reviewed the buffet ledgers, they didn't see the marketing magic that kept players happy. They saw red ink. They saw a division bleeding $10 million annually with no direct return. They implemented a new, ruthless metric, revenue per square foot. They surveyed that massive dining hall and calculated, if we install banks of slot machines here, or a high-end steakhouse charging $80 a cut, we generate immediate profit. Currently, we are merely subsidizing gluttony for low-value customers. The philosophy shifted radically from acquire the customer at any cost to monetize every single interaction. They began to resent the bargain hunter. They asked, why are we subsidizing low rollers who only play penny slots? Gradually, they tightened the screws to test our tolerance. They downgraded the crab quality to cheaper suppliers. They eliminated the free champagne. They hiked prices from $20 to $40, then to $60. But they couldn't execute the buffet outright. It was too iconic, too embedded in the culture. They required a massive external variable, a global catastrophe, to provide the political cover necessary to finalize their plan. Part 4. The 2020 kill shot, the perfect alibi. And in 2020, the universe delivered that catastrophe on a silver platter. This brings us to the 2020 kill shot. Now, the official narrative, the story their PR firms disseminate to the press, is that the pandemic killed the buffet organically. They claimed it was purely a decision based on hygiene and safety. They stated that shared utensils and open food trays were biological hazards, and they closed them solely to protect the consumer from infection. That is a fabrication. Or at best, it is a convenient half-truth used to mask a business decision. 2020 was not the cause of death. It was the perfect alibi. It was the excuse they had sought for 20 years to shut down these money pits. Consider the logic. When casinos reopened, slot banks were packed with people sitting inches apart. Card tables were full. Patrons touched chips and buttons handled by thousands of strangers. If safety was the primary directive, the entire casino floor was a hazard. But the gaming floor generates revenue, so it remained active. The buffet generates losses, so it remained shuttered. When the world paused, these corporations analyzed their P&L statements and realized they could finally amputate the bleeding limb without facing a public backlash. They locked the doors to the buffets, not with the intent to reopen them post-virus, but with a covert strategy to keep them dark
permanently. They realized that by forcing you into a food hall or fast casual outlet, they could eliminate massive food waste, eradicate the massive unionized labor force, and invert a loss into a profit. They didn't just pause the buffet, they suffocated it in its sleep while we were all distracted by the global crisis. Part 5. The food hall illusion. Asset light, profit heavy. So, if the buffet is terminated, what exactly replaced it? They branded it the food hall, pitching it to the public as a curated artisanal culinary revolution. They utilized buzzwords like craft, local, and chef-driven to simulate a premium experience. But let's strip away the marketing veneer and audit the financial reality. The food hall is arguably the most effective revenue extraction scheme in modern Vegas history. Here is the cold equation. A food hall is simply a mall food court with dim lighting, better decor, and 300% markups. When you enter, notice the void in service. There are no servers refilling your beverages, no busboys clearing your plates. You perform the labor yourself. You stand in a queue, you order at a digital terminal to save them labor costs, you transport your own tray, and often, you are expected to sanitize your own table. Yet, you're remitting $25 for a burger and fries that cost $12 at a sit-down diner a mile away. For the corporations, this model is a financial miracle. They slashed their labor costs by nearly 40% compared to a traditional venue. But the genius of the scheme runs deeper. Previously, the casino owned the buffet and absorbed the risk of food costs. In the food hall model, the casino often acts merely as a landlord. They charge exorbitant rent to third-party vendors, often skimming a percentage of every gross sale. They have externalized the risk entirely. If a sushi tenant fails, the casino loses nothing. They simply evict them and replace them with the next concept. They swapped a loss leader that built loyalty for a rent-seeking machine that extracts value. They engineered a system offering less service, less food, and less comfort for significantly higher cost. It's not innovation. It's ruthless optimization. Part 6. The luxury barrier. Purging the middle class. But you might argue, the buffet isn't entirely extinct. The bacchanal at Caesars remains. The Wynn still serves crab. You are correct. A few survive as loss leaders for the very rich. But approach the podium and examine the pricing. A weekend dinner is now breaching $80 per head. Once you add tax and the expected gratuity, a family of 4 is facing a bill nearing $400 for a single meal. This brings us to the luxury barrier. This price escalation isn't merely inflation, it is a deliberate firewall constructed to filter the clientele. For decades, the Vegas buffet was the great equalizer of American society. It was the Sunday ritual for thousands of locals. It was the one place where a construction worker could dine on the same prime rib as a CEO, sitting just a few tables away. It was democratic. But the corporations decided democratic was inefficient and attracted the wrong crowd. They desired exclusive. By raising the price floor to nearly $100, they have effectively purged the middle class from the dining room. They rebranded the buffet from a people's feast to an elite privilege. The math is cold and calculating. They generate more profit serving 500 wealthy tourists at $80 than 2,000 regular folks at $30. It simplifies logistics, reduces staff requirements, and manufactures an aura of exclusivity. They are broadcasting a clear signal. If you aren't wagering $5,000 at the baccarat table, we don't want you consuming our inventory. They haven't just raised prices, they have gentrified the very soul of Vegas dining, informing the families who built this city that they are no longer welcome at the table they helped construct. Part 7. The death of community. The efficiency of isolation. And this leads us to the final, most critical deduction of our investigation, the death of community. When they liquidated the cheap buffet, they didn't just remove calories from the menu. They dismantled the last communal hub in Las Vegas. Analyze the old buffet layout. Tables were long and proximity was unavoidable. You were forced to rub elbows with strangers. You conversed with the elderly couple adjacent to you while awaiting the fresh roast beef. You exchanged intelligence on which slot machines were loose.
There was a chaotic, noisy, vital energy to the room. It functioned as a town square. The us versus the house mentality unified the room in a shared experience. Now observe the food halls. They are architected for isolation and turnover. You acquire your overpriced sushi box. You locate a small, secluded high-top table in a corner. You consume your food rapidly while scrolling through your phone, and you exit. There is no connection. There is no lingering. It is transactional, clinical, and efficient. The architecture itself prohibits human interaction. We have lost the Vegas vibe, that reckless, generous spirit that made anything feel possible in the desert. The casinos have traded their soul for operational efficiency. They have swapped the wish of good luck for the demand to pay up. The cheap buffet was the last artifact of a mob-era philosophy that valued customer dopamine as a pathway to profit. Now, we are merely data points in a quarterly spreadsheet, optimized for maximum extraction. The strip is brighter than ever, the towers are taller, but the warmth, the human variable that made Vegas magical, has been deleted from the source code. So, let's review the evidence one last time. We began with the initial lure, a calculated loss leader designed to trap us in the building. We watched it expand into the golden age of excess, only to be strangled by the corporate takeover that prioritized yield over hospitality. We witnessed them utilize 2020 as the perfect alibi to execute the kill shot, replacing our beloved feasts with the food hall illusion, a soulless cafeteria model designed to minimize labor and maximize rent. The death of the buffet is not about food. It is a symbol of how Las Vegas has lost its moral compass. It is a case study of corporate efficiency, dissecting a cultural icon to extract every last cent. They forgot the foundational rule that built this oasis. You can shear a sheep many times, but you can skin it only once. By skinning the customers with $25 burgers and $80 buffets, they may report record quarterly profits today, but they are eroding the deep loyalty that sustained this city for 70 years. I want your testimony on this. Have you defected from the Vegas food scene because of this? Do you possess a memory of a legendary buffet that is now erased? Or do you actually prefer the efficiency of the new food halls? Log your story in the comments below. I analyze every single one of them. If you want more forensic deep dives exposing the economic reality behind the businesses we use every day, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It signals to the algorithm that you value the truth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.